terrorism is a social construct. At least that's what Mohammed Hijab said, which immediately sort of made me think about what is the social construct actually, and it inspired a long discussion on the production meeting. But that is one of the things Mohammed Hijab said. I think in his very clear attempt to basically defend any actions against Jews or any actions against Israelis, while he will as with many people do, sort of say, I don't I don't like Iran, but surprisingly, he finds himself very quick to defend the actions of Iran um, when it comes to certain kind of people they fight against. So today we'll be going through a video on Piers Morgan show, or Piers Morgan Uncensored, with Mohammed Hijab and Alan Dershowitz. We have a clips, but I have to warn you, most of the video was just Mohammed Hijab attacking Alan Dershowitz with different kinds of arguments, like the fact that Alan Dershowitz defended, or he was defense attorney of Jeffrey Epstein. He kept bringing that up. I tried to cut out most of it just because I don't think it really adds anything to the debate. But I think there is one clip that has a lot of it inside, because I do want to comment on it and the way Mohammed Hijab has conducted himself throughout the interview. So as I've said, we have a few clips. Joining me today is Marco, Richard, and Michael. Hey, guys.
Hello.
And welcome to the reality show, everyone. Before we go to video, I'll just go quickly around the table, ask people. So, Marco, have you heard about Mohammed Hijab before? And do you have some brief thoughts about the interview before we go in?
Yeah, my brief thoughts are that I hadn't heard of him. I think that anyone can sit here and try to apply rules of day-to-day living to a war zone. And of course, you're going to end up blaming anybody who's winning a war, because people who win wars tend to kill more people on the other side than get killed on their side. And acting like this is some sort of a soccer match, or that's real football for you all, is nuts. And I think it's philosophically indefensible. And I think judging people who are involved in a war, especially when people get attacked in any other way than that they need to use lethal force and annihilate their attacker, is just wrong. And I fundamentally disagree with him. I don't really believe he has any philosophy except screaming.
Marco?
Yeah, well, I never actually come across him. I've heard the name Razi mentioned a couple of times, but I've never actually come across anything he said or did, luckily. I mean, the guy is a 5-year-old. He cannot do a debate with civilized people at all. He's ignorant, rude, arrogant, childish, offensive, deceitful, ill-informed, and most of all, he's a massive racist. It's impossible to like this guy. As much as you try and be fair, the guy's an idiot. I'm sorry. Just listen to what he's saying in this interview, and it's just so appalling. I mean, we debate on this channel evil people, ignorant people, not very bright people, accountants, all this kind of people you were talking about. But this guy is a new law for humankind. It's just unbearable.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Ayn Rand wrote that you should judge and prepare to be judged. And right now I'm judging Daniel for picking this video and inflicting it upon us, and now upon clips upon you good people. So, but I think at the moment, on Sundays, we're doing the logic course, which shows how arguments should be run and all of the techniques people use to dodge arguments. Now, quite honestly, you don't need a load of Latin names for each of the categories in order to analyze this clip. A 6-year-old could point out who the nasty, rude man is out of the 3 people on the stage. And an 11-year-old could point out how most of what he says is irrelevant to the argument that is supposed to be being discussed as part of the interview. And that kind of captures all you need to know, and you'll see for yourselves in no short order.
So sort of defending myself against being judged. It was between this and Norman Finkelstein. So I think I made the right choice, but I'm ready to be judged. So I have the video ready. As I've said, we start about 4 minutes in because that's when they actually started discussing sort of the topic. Although Alan Dershowitz did start, I think, a bit earlier, but then, as I've said, Mohammed Hijab basically went on to talk about Jeffrey Epstein for like 2 minutes. So we start about 9 minutes in, and we might be jumping a little bit, but you can see the whole show on Piers Morgan if you really want to. All right, let's listen a little bit.
Me and you were talking about October the 7th. We spent about 3 or 4 minutes actually talking about sexual assault allegations, if you remember that. And actually here, what we have is Israeli soldiers like Mir from Unit 100, and that's on The Guardian, it's on Sky News, it's on all these kinds of platforms, coming out, and there's videographic evidence of him raping another man. I haven't heard condemnation from you, and I don't expect to hear it from him who defended Epstein. But this shows you the bias in the coverage for a year, where we know the ICJ have said that there's a plausible genocide.
You haven't been watching my show.
I think I have.
No, you haven't.
Have you spoken about me?
You're talking complete bullshit.
Okay, tell me why.
Right?
Tell me why.
Because A, I did condemn what you've just talked about in a previous debate.
Good.
Right?
Dershowitz, do you condemn it?
Yes, of course. I condemn any rape of anybody and any assault on anybody who's in captivity.
And you also condemn the right of rape protest that took place in Israel. And you acknowledge that.
Okay, so this first part about the alleged rape. So we've covered when it happened. I'm trying to remember if you guys have been on that specific episode. There was a sort of the video he was referring to. Again, the way he said it, you would think, we have video like an IDF soldiers, like, I don't want to use that word, but sexually assaulting someone on camera. With the actual video is basically them like being hidden behind something. When it comes to someone in the chat says, there's no rape in the video that we can see. But people, when this video came out, people were quick to criticize Israel, criticize the IDF. But very soon it came out, or when the report came out, the reason why this even started is basically one of the prisoners, again, someone who committed October 7, one of those prisoners were basically taken into hospital, and they had some injuries around their
anal region.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael. It's good to have a doctor who has
finally a use for me.
But later it came out that these injuries were self-inflicted. So again, but what is the first thing that came out? Alleged rape by the IDF, and that's the story that has been going on since, and it's still being used now. That's why it's always important to really look up, like, what's the actual story. People are quick to jump in on, and the first thing that is reported, that will be discussed, basically forever. Michael, what do you think about this first part?
I think, first of all, as Dershowitz said, any rape or sexual assault is unacceptable, period, full stop. The second point is that why you would pull out, this is again history by anecdote, and you basically assume, the assumption here is that he's trying to get you to believe is that all of the Israeli soldiers are always raping or sexually assaulting all of their prisoners. Because it happened to one person, it happened to everybody. It doesn't take any other context, and also the fact that it's just flat out wrong. It's the same problem we had when Hamas killed, when the Israeli Army IDF killed 500 people at the hospital in Gaza, and of course it was actually Hamas misfiring many rockets and killing about 200 people, which was fine, which was perfectly fine. No condemnation anywhere in the world for doing that.
Just quickly, so they don't correct us later, I believe it was the Palestinian Jihad who actually did that.
Okay, so Islamic Jihad. My tough to tell them apart, but you're very good point. And it's the same behavior all the time. And the argument is all about screaming. And I don't understand also what we're learning by whether this was condemned by Piers Morgan or anybody else. I mean, there's no the bias in the media. You can find bias. Frankly, there's a lot more bias against Israel in the media, but it's not. You're not teaching anybody anything, and you're not leading to what I think Piers Morgan was trying to do, was to get these two to come to some kind of an agreement. And this wasn't going to help anybody get to any agreement defending whether it is more or less biased in one direction or another.
Yeah, and as I always say, you know, people have free will, and you will see bad things happening. But always the point is, what is the actual policy of the government, and what happens after that? So the reason why we learned about this story is because soldiers were arrested for allegedly raping a prisoner. They were arrested because, yeah, Israel has, I guess it wouldn't be laws when it comes to sort of military, but regulations, or sort of like a proper things to do when it comes to, you know, holding prisoners. Hamas doesn't have that, and Hamas encourages rape. Hamas encouraged rape on October 7th. That's the policy they have. So again, people always try to equate these things as you know, that side killed people and that side killed people, and it's somehow equivalent. But no, you have to look at what is the actual policy, and, you know, what is the resolution when things go bad, when, you know, things cannot go bad for Hamas, because everything is basically a fair game when it comes to either holding prisoners, holding hostages, or, you know, going into Israel and killing people. You can do it, but Israel does actually make sure that when these things happen, they get investigated and they get properly resolved. But Marco, what did you think about? And also, he somehow managed to put in the Jeffrey Epstein thing even into first clip. I thought I got it out.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned earlier on, this guy has got the debating skills of a 5-year-old. When he doesn't know what to say, he starts having a tantrum, shouts loud over the other people. And to be honest, he's effectively taken over the show, bitch slapped Piers Morgan, and effectively taking over the whole show here. And all he does all the time, if you observe what he does, is like in this clip. First of all, he peddles a lie, something which he knows is a lie about the rape, and then I'm right because you were defending Epstein. So that's, you know, that's one of the fallacies we've been studying. I mean, if you this kind of debating, this kind of switcheroos that he does all the time, are just designed to distract your attention from the fact he hasn't got a leg to stand on argument-wise. So every time he throws something there which has got nothing to do with discussion, doesn't prove his point in the first place, doesn't prove his lies, but, you know, we have to believe him because somebody else is bad or somebody else has done something else. It's just absolutely pathetic. And this lasts for an hour. I mean, that's painful.
And of course, it's a deflection. It's a deflection from the fact that Hamas use rape as a standard MO in the way they act all the time. It's a policy decision they put into action to give it a formal definition. And it's a deflection from that. Is an attempt to try and make the IDF equivalent to Hamas, or distract from the fact that Hamas do that. I find it astonishing that anybody could even for 1 second fall into that trap, but people do, because in the same way they repeat the Lancet article lies, that it wasn't an article anyway, it was only a letter, but they'll use that technique. All it matters is that you can associate a few words together and then spew it out again and again and again, and then give it its own life across social media or through the mouths of repeated liars. And of course, you know, this guy is an Oxford University graduate, believe it or not. And what does that say about a degree at Oxford? Very little. And of course, you know, a sad indictment of the education system, both here in the UK and in the US.
Yeah, so we have, I think we have one more clip when it comes to sort of the prisoner or the hostages part. So let's listen to it and we can discuss a bit more.
We have condemned in the first instance. But we're not seeing the same level of coverage with Hamas as we are seeing with these people that are shoving rods off people's ass and raping people on videographic evidence. And you have 3,000 people, you talk about the hostages, you've got 3,000 people in essentially captivity, according to Human Rights Watch and B'Tselem, who are prisoners of war of Israel. And we are spending a fraction of the time speaking about them as compared to speaking about the hostages. This shows you the inherent
well,
bias.
There's no comparison. There's no comparison between innocent hostages who did nothing wrong and people who are being charged with criminal offenses.
They're not charged with criminal offenses. That's why you're meant to know better. You're meant to know better than that.
But they are charged with
security criminal offenses.
So I think Alan Dershowitz started pretty well there, but I think he went a bit wrong there. But I want to go to Michael. Is it surprising that, don't you think it's unfair that we don't see the same reporting of the people who were kidnapped on October 7 and taken into Gaza and the people who committed October 7 and were caught and put in Israeli prison? Don't you think it's unfair?
I think it's very unfair. I think the amount of coverage of the actual hostages and what was done on October 7th is minimalist. It's swept over. The analogy I think I've used here in the past is it's like telling somebody they need to go to open heart surgery and saying open heart surgery with the same breath and thoughtfulness as you say, and I take a beta blocker after I have a heart attack. It's the same kind of, it just rolls off your tongue. And it's like, it's as if it were equal. The second point is that all the people that are in prison in Israel that are Palestinian prisoners, when I say all, okay, 99%. There's 1% innocent people always in every system, especially in the Middle East, that are maybe not guilty of the particular crime they're accused of. But 99% of the people that are in prison that are enemy prisoners are because they committed a crime or were about to commit a crime, and they were caught with red-handed with a whole assortment of weapons to kill people. And it is, of course, absurd. The other problem we have in the West is that we pretend as if a terrorist is somehow a misunderstood criminal, or maybe not even a criminal. They might even just be a misunderstood person who's fighting for their freedom and for the betterment of their family. And I do agree that it is ridiculous the way things are covered, because we have one country that's a democracy that actually has a court system, and we have another group of barbarians who don't believe in any of this stuff and take people hostage. So yes, I agree that it's unfair. One other point I would just make is, so let's bring this guy back on the next show after this whole notion that the man was sexually assaulted by anyone and actually did it himself. And let's put him up there and ask him, where does your argument go now? Now that the N=1 example you gave us that you were so righteous about, what happens? And the answer is when people teach history by anecdote or try to deliver news by anecdote, it falls apart. Because anecdotes don't explain what happens. Sometimes they're wrong, as in this case. Pretty much all the things that the IDF is accused of, nearly all of them that are egregious, were not committed by the IDF. And then you end up with nothing. And all you have is a bunch of screaming people who are so invested in their argument and their righteousness that they don't see anything but themselves. And that's the fundamental problem here.
Marco?
Yeah, I mean, it takes somebody with rare evil in his own soul to equate the hostages and the criminals held in Israeli cells. As Michael pointed out, people in the Israel kept by Israel security are criminals. People who try to blow up Israeli citizens. People who were committing atrocity on October the 7th. People who were captured while trying to, throw rocket, blow up Israelis. I mean, to make that statement soon after a year from October the 7th attack is just pure, utter evil. To totally ignore the fact that still these 100 hostages are held by the Gazans is just, it's undescribable. You cannot put yourself in the shoes of this guy and try and understand why is he doing this, apart from the fact that he hates Israel so much that he's willing to justify Iran's action, he's willing to justify Hamas action, Hezbollah, and all this kind of stuff. And that's just unspeakable. I mean, just look at what Hezbollah does to the looters who enter in properties which have been evacuated. They are taken, beaten up, and tied it to a lamppost or post in the middle of the street and left them in the middle of a roundabout, like animals. They're treated like animals because they haven't got a fair judiciary system. They do not treat criminals in a civilized way as Israel does. So, as Michael said, if some innocent are held by the Israelis, there is a process by which they will be recognized innocent and released. So, the animals on the other side don't do that because they are just uncivilized savages.
Well, they don't have to have a system when all the Jews are guilty. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah. The personal actions of people are what count. The personal actions of the people who have ended up in Israeli prisons is why they've ended up there. The personal actions of the hostages are completely irrelevant to why they've been taken. And that's the distinction, to be honest. I think, of course, you've got the references to Human Rights Watch and B'Tselem. And of course, we've spoken before on this channel about how B'Tselem give cameras to people to film incidents and then edit what preceded it, so they can show aggression that's in response to an initial antagonizing action or that was not seen on camera or not shown afterwards. And of course, they're using this unearned prestige, this borrowed authority of organizations and their supposed humanitarian values, which of course we know to be BS in the first place. But that using that as your argument is weak in the extreme, and of course just doesn't apply to the facts. I remember the video that we saw of the incident we're talking about in terms of what he's describing as this rape, which simply we saw some people walk around the edge of a room. We saw a big time lapse in the footage, a big cut that wasn't explained remotely in terms of whether it was the same day or some other day or later time, and then you see people behind some shields, behind a barrier where frankly anything could have been happening. They could have been having a fag, having a cigarette for all I know. So it was evidentiary of zero value. And of course, but that doesn't matter. You just associate the words together and you just propagate the lie. And of course, that's all.
I mean, let's actually play the video. I found it. I still have it. So let's just play it just so people know what we talk about if they haven't seen it. So this is the video he has quoted as basically video footage of Israeli soldiers raping a Palestinian prisoner.
חמאס שוכבים על הרצפה כפותים, עיניהם מכוסות. הנה כאן קבוצה של חיילי המילואים מכוח 100, יחידה המשמשת להבטחת המתקן. הם לוקחים את המחבל, הנה הם כאן בפינת המתקן, כנראה מודעים למצלמות האבטחה ומנסים להסתיר מעשיהם במגינים. הצילום כולל תיעוד של העבירה מיוחסת לאנשי המילואים, מעשה סדום בנסיבות אינוס. שעות אחר כך
So yeah, that was the video that he said is a graphic image of a Palestinian prisoner getting raped.
And from the video, which by the way was taken, the two shots are from 3 days apart from each other. It's shown as a continuous thing. The guy was able to know. He actually says that people are raped. So he knows that more one person must have been raped, and also he knows that they used a rod. It's like, really, bloody hell, you know a lot of this kind of stuff. Have you done in the past by any chance? It's just idiotic to effectively lying through his teeth and presenting it as a truth.
Another clip?
If we must.
Yes.
To take you seriously, if you want us to take this coverage seriously, if you want us to take Western media seriously, then let's, for God's sake, talk about proportionality as your favorite word. We're talking about 30,000 people detained in prisons on the one hand, and 100 people who are hostages. And yet we have managed somehow to spend way more time proportionally.
You said 3,000 a minute ago. Which one is it? 3,000?
Sorry, 3,000. 3,000.
It's not 30,000.
Not 30.
Okay,
3,000.
Well, get your numbers right if you're going to make that comment.
Okay, I misspoke.
You exaggerated 10 times.
Not a problem. He spoke about Iran. Let me ask you a question.
Tell you what, let me ask the question.
Sure, go ahead.
And you guys try and debate it.
Go ahead.
At the moment, Alan Dershowitz is being very civilised in the way he's debating.
I'm sure you're going to say that.
You're just making
he might have leverage on
attacks and shouting all the time.
He's your friend.
No one can understand it when you shout.
Have you met him before?
I know Alan well.
Oh, you know him well.
I respect him very much.
Oh, yes, you do.
He's one of America's top lawyers.
His top lawyers?
Yeah, he is.
And you're an unbiased person here on Central.
An unbiased person about Alan Dershowitz? Why?
Yeah, so I just wanted to show that clip about the sort of the way Mohammed has been sort of carrying himself, like constantly well, for one, taking over the show. You know, for a quick bit, Piers Morgan was able to take it back, saying, wait a minute, it's my show. I should be asking the questions. And so he took it back for a second. But even then, Mohammed Hijab managed to basically make it about, saying that, Piers Morgan is there to defend Alan Dershowitz, or to basically like make some sort of bias reporting. Again, the whole way he's conducting himself, again, it shows there's no willingness to actually like have any sort of debate, and it's not surprising. I mean, we shouldn't be surprised that yes, someone who defends basically the actions that have happened on October 7 by basically saying people are living under oppression, so they go out and rape Jews. That's what you do when you live under oppression. When he defends things like that, you shouldn't be surprised by the way he conducts himself. I think Bonnie in the chat has brought up the fact that he has philosopher degrees, and I think Richard mentioned that he has graduated Oxford. That apparently doesn't give you anything. It doesn't defend you from basically becoming something like this. Michael, anything you'd like to say about this?
Yeah, look, I don't think this is anything much different. Maybe it's more vociferous, it's louder, it's maybe nastier, and maybe a little more sarcastic. But philosophically, this is exactly what's going on in college campuses with these so-called righteous Hamas supporters, globalized jihad supporters, who don't have any philosophy of anything. And the first thing they don't understand is that their right to protest is guaranteed by our Constitution, which doesn't exist in any of these other countries. And they would be the first people, well, after the journalists, they would be the second people after the journalists then to be annihilated by these types of regimes. And his behavior is very typical of that. What these kids, and they're stupid kids that have never accomplished anything in their life, and they've been taught by degree-bearing, and I'll mention that at the end, degree-bearing professors believe is that they get to feel anything they want, and their feelings get to replace the truth and replace philosophy and replace logic. Not just philosophy, it's logic. And that is sufficient because they've been told all their life that they're special and unique and important, and their feelings and their truth is what matters. And he's just an example of this culture of us putting up with any opinion. You can have the right to an opinion. Everyone has a right to an opinion, but there are stupid and wrong opinions. Those are facts. And wrong opinions are when you support people that will murder you if you disagree with them. And he will be agreed with by the terrorists 9 times out of 10, but the 10th time he says something they don't like, and they pull out a gun, they blow him away, because that's how it works in Barbaria with the barbarians. The last point is this degree. I think we've all come to realize that having a degree is unfortunately doesn't mean anything. And having a degree from these so-called esteemed universities probably means even less. Having a philosophy degree or any of the humanities has become a mark of anti-truth. People that are so clever and so smart that they have the ability to discern that 1 + 1 is actually 3. And that's what these amazing institutions have given us. That's why Harvard was led by a president who believed that killing, maiming, raping, beheading was okay in certain contexts, and that shouting from the river to the sea was okay depending on the context. And it was the same at Columbia University, and it was the same at it's the same at all of these places that tolerate this absurdity. This isn't just bad, it's absurd. It's anti-life. And unfortunately, these people have this bully pulpit where you get up there and you scream at people that have been thoughtful their entire life. I don't agree that Alan Dershowitz should have defended Jeffrey Epstein, but the law and the Constitution, which I fully agree with, are very clear that everyone deserves a defendant. And Alan Dershowitz is a constitutional scholar. By the way, Jeffrey Epstein went to jail. So he didn't do that great a job defending him. I'm being facetious, obviously. I don't like the fact that Alan followed the rules in the Constitution and took the job, but he certainly went, like Piers said, and thankfully Piers was extremely reasonable in this interview. He was doing his job as a lawyer. That's what the Constitution guarantees everybody, and I'm glad. That's why we have 1% of people that are guilty that are locked up, not 25% or 50% or 90% of innocent people being locked. Because we do have a constitution, we do follow laws as you do in the UK and other civilized countries. So that my thoughts are that we all have given way too much airtime to this vitriol and this emotional bombast that has no place with logic and philosophy, and certainly no place in building a civilization and allowing for humans to flourish.
Yeah, and it's disappointing that people like Mohammed Hijab, and I think that's why it's important to talk about them, are popular. If you look at the comment section under Piers Morgan, Mohammed Hijab won this debate. He won that interview. People are making fun of Alan Dershowitz and Piers Morgan for basically not being able to handle Mohammed Hijab. Again, this the fact that this has become a norm. This has been something that, yes, someone acting like him. Even if you, even if you are on the side of the Palestinians, whatever that means. If someone like Mohammed Hijab is your hero, or someone like him is someone you like to represent your cause, I think it's very disturbing the fact that someone like that is accepted as that's someone we want on our side. Marco?
Yeah, are you gonna play the next few seconds, or shall I just mention it?
I can't. No.
Well, it's a priceless statement, because after the end of this clip we've just seen, he said, "Yes, Piers, you're biased against anything which is anti-Western." Like, wow! So you're openly admitting you're anti-Western, and you are angry because the guy doesn't want you to spew out your anti-Western ideas. Fantastic. That it takes a philosopher to make this kind of boo-boo, this kind of statement. But again, it takes a philosopher to go through all these logical fallacies and just literally trample all over them. Clearly, he's doing it on purpose. And that's why people tend to agree with this kind of thugs, because they shout, they overpower the other side with emotionalism, and by making their loud statements, they sound like they are making a firm statement. They constantly use authority, like mentioned the UN said that, or that the researcher said that, to bolster their vacuous arguments. And that sounds, on the surface, like a valid argument, somebody that knows their stuff. And or they can asking questions like, "Oh, well, you don't know the name of this person that died, did you, in the bombing? Therefore, you don't know anything." All this kind of behavior, this kind of appeal to the skepticism that is taking the West like a wildfire. This kind of, we don't really know anything, so perhaps he's right. I don't know something. Perhaps I might be wrong on something else. This kind of ignoring the fact that truth can be actually gained. Knowledge is something based on reality. And yes, there are things you don't know them, but that's why science is there. That's why you discover things. That's why you apply your knowledge and your reason to discover things that you don't know. But these people, what do? They just exploit it and pretend that you don't know something, therefore you know nothing. And they try and gaslight you into believing they're made up stories. And by the way, again, if you're a member of ARCUK, you're doing the logic course, you would know that appealing to this kind of fallacies is because you actually pushing what Ayn Rand used to call primacy of consciousness, i.e. you are ignoring reality in order to push this view of a make-believe world, which conforms to your wishes, to your whims, to what you would like to see. Therefore, use the fallacy in order to make you believe that the Palestinians are the good guy and Israel is bad. It's just so pathetic. Once you understand what they're on about, this is such a pathetic guy, this one. It's just very repellent.
To be honest,
sorry, just quickly. I think he mentions you're biased against anything anti-Western a bit later. But yeah, when I heard that phrase, you are against anything that's anti-Western, I thought about it and it's like, yeah, I am. Because what does the West stand for? Yeah, I am against Islamic dictatorships. I am against, totalitarian states. I am against like anti-liberal, basically ideologies, Islam or whatever other authoritarian or backward culture you have. Yeah, I am against that. Thank you for putting it in one sentence. Richard?
Daniel, if I can jump in, I can't resist just commenting on that, because I think those of us that have some logic and understand a little bit of this stuff, need to stop trying to feel apologetic for the West. The West is not trying to control you. I mean, look, politicians all over want to influence you and control you, but it's a bit different if they're not allowed to come into your house and put a gun to your head and take you out and do what they want. Okay, we're talking about the West allowing for human flourishing, to allow individuals to pursue their goals, that is the pursuit of happiness, as it says in our declaration. And that the problem that I have, and that has arisen, I think, at universities, is there's nothing to argue about anymore. If you actually believe that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness matter, if liberty is the most important thing, and you're not allowed to have total liberty, because if you step on someone else's liberty, you violated the principle. So individual liberties, to the extent you don't violate someone else's liberty, is the goal. If you don't agree with that, if you think anything else, it means that you think that someone else has the right to tell you what to do, which means you automatically abdicate your brain to somebody else's judgment, which is, I will state on this show, and I think we all would agree, none of us want that. None of us agree with that. None of us believe that you can form a civilization with that, with anything that's against that. Liberty is a simple concept in the sense that leave us alone. Let us do what we can do. We will give you money and taxes to defend us, and you will leave us alone so we can flourish. The more we flourish, the more taxes you get, the more you can defend us, and it all works very nicely. You can build roads, you can build schools, etc. It's not a difficult thing in theory. What's remarkable to me is the West is on their back feet now defending this notion that there's some better thing than liberty, than individual liberty. I, for one, don't believe it, because as soon as I say there's something better, I'm giving up my freedom to somebody else who I don't believe is smarter than I am or more knowledgeable or has more wisdom. And that's what is missing from, I think, a lot of this stuff. That's the foundational problem with all of this crap. We didn't do anything wrong in the West. If you want to go be crazy and be living under Sharia law and facing east 5 times a day and praying, that's fine. Just don't make me do it. And that's what's remarkable, that we are apologizing for this, which is shocking.
Richard?
I wanted to refer to the what you said about the comments and the fact that people claim he won this debate. Well, it's like claiming that a footballer won a football match when he's constantly fouling the opponent and claiming he's been fouled himself and taking dives and faking fouls and all that. If your standard of victory is to bully, cheat, and lie, in order to claim the trophy, then the trophy is worthless. And the match, the format of the match is wrong, to be honest. And it's depressing that people even view it that way. But it says a lot about the wider culture, the fact that those are acceptable standards, and simply tripping up your opponent with sticking your foot out and tripping them up and claiming that scored a good point against them is so shallow, and it betrays the character of the person, because your character is formed by the moral code you adopt, the convictions you hold, and the extent to which you implement them, and they form the kind of person you are. And you can see the kind of person he is on full display here, without needing to get into his head. You see his actual actions and behavior demonstrate who he is and what the product of the kind of non-thinking that he does leads to. It leads to a vile human being whose code is nihilism, destruction, and disorder, and chaos, and anarchy. And who would welcome that into their life? No rational person.
Just quickly, let me cover a few super chats. So first, thank you, YB, for a super chat. He says, or they say, Hijab is hilarious. His IQ can't go lower. Piers is the new Jerry Springer. If that guy was an October terrorist, then who can be mad at the man accused? Well, when it comes to people, whenever people try to criticize someone's IQ, having a high IQ doesn't make you a good person. And I think at some point, wait, no, I think it was Finkelstein, actually, which I didn't make you watch, but there was another interview with Finkelstein when he sort of goes on a rant. It might have been just like 2 sentences, but I think it was like 5 minutes. But he goes on a rant where he basically talks about how Hassan Nasrallah has a high IQ, and it's sort of like it makes no difference, really.
But you certainly drop a few points after watching this thing. That's for sure.
Well,
I think it's pretty well documented. There are psychopaths that have very high IQs. I mean, one thing has nothing to do with another. Just like a degree from Oxford doesn't predict anything. Clearly, it doesn't predict anything anymore.
Someone says, I do tend to think intelligence is positively correlated with morality, though. Well, most of the philosophers have sort of argued for a different kind of morality than I would say is good. And I'd say probably that most philosophers had pretty high IQ, because, yeah, you need to have.
I think the key fact, though, is having a focused mind, isn't it? And to whatever level your IQ enables you to reach in terms of conclusions, it's being in focus and concentrating on the facts at hand, and the facts and concentrating on the essentials, ignoring the irrelevant. That's what defines it. And to whatever level your IQ extends to you doing that, it's always possible. Volition is there for all of us to exercise.
Yeah, and it's a tool like any other. Some people brag about having high IQ. The question is, well, what are you doing with it? If you just have it and don't do anything, then yeah, it's pointless. We also have a super chat from Alex. Thank you so much. She says, no one wants his Dava, so he's pivoted to Panto. Does anybody know what either of those words mean?
Yes, pantomime is what Panto is for, yes. You can look that up if you want, but yeah, it fits with my chaos and anarchy and playing to the audience and just trying to, provoke a reaction and working on the most low-level emotional response possible.
We also have another super chat from YB. Thank you so much. They say their religion is their hate teacher. They are criminally insane psychopaths. Israel's response is mild in comparison to what they did on that day. So I don't want to let if you are talking about specifically Hamas or sort of like Islamists, I don't want to get criminally insane. I'm not letting them get away. They are not insane. They have a capability of basically, as we've said, focusing their mind and trying to achieve something they could have achieved. They had they had almost 20 years to make a Singapore in the Middle East, and no, they've decided to instead, what's a different equivalence to like something small that like I need the opposite of Singapore. But yeah, they decided to basically commit to destruction of Jews, and basically that being the only thing they focus all their resources and all their lives towards. Okay, do we want to hear more from Mohammed Hijab?
You're really asking that question, are you?
Yes. Well, and we also have a super chat from Gail. Thank you so much. She says, is knowledge and practice of logic essential to high IQ? It's more of a philosophy form question. Is knowledge and practice of logic essential to high IQ?
Well, if you might be as smart as you like, but if you integrate stuff that doesn't make sense in a way that doesn't make sense, so you might well be thick as two planks, because what's the use? So logic is the application of your reason, isn't it? Your reason at work. So it's the method of how you learn and integrate things that you learn. So
if you entertain contradictions and you deny reality, then that can be demonstrated in all sorts of ways. You can slam into a tree by ignoring reality. You don't have to be too bright to demonstrate the point.
You don't need to be bright to be a priest. You just believe in a God and off you go.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to the opposite of let's just go to Mohammed Hijab.
Iran was attacked on April the 1st, right? It was attacked, the embassy of Iran was attacked in Syria by Israel. After that, on the first occasion, they then sent missiles and drones, correct? Now, my question to you is, does Iran have a right to defend itself? And if so, what is a proportionate response? Because you see, I've been having a moral quandary about the issue. Piers Morgan, what's a proportionate response for Iran?
I'll tell you what I think about Iran.
So after this, they go about a minute just talking about Mohammed Hijab, just repeating, well, does Iran have a right to defend itself? Actually, let's watch a little bit more. I'll switch forward to, and we can cover both of these parts.
Support the Iranian regime?
Not unconditionally, but I support their right.
What conditions do you agree with them about?
Their right to defend themselves. Do you believe they have a right to defend themselves?
No, I think they're terrorists.
Oh, so they don't have a right to defend themselves? Iran does not have a right to defend itself?
They do, but they're not the ones.
So what is proportionate response?
They're not the ones.
What's a proportionate response?
Okay.
No,
can I answer you?
You asked this question.
Piers Morgan almost went right when he said Iran doesn't have a right to defend itself. No, it doesn't. Iran is a dictatorship. It's a almost totalitarian state, not respecting any rights of its citizens. No, it has no rights as a state. Again, I don't like that formulation, because the state only exists to protect the rights of its own citizens. The state in itself doesn't have any rights. It just gets sort of like collective protection when it comes to their own people. And yeah, Iran doesn't respect rights of any of their citizens. And therefore it doesn't have any right to defend itself. Michael?
Yeah, I mean, this is the Obama doctrine of moral equivalence. And I'm being extremely, I mean this sincerely. I think that we never had a president of the US, or the free leader of the free world, that couldn't publicly distinguish between corrupt regimes and non-corrupt regimes the way Obama managed to do. And to do a deal so blatantly with Iran, to pretend that Iran would abide by any sort of regulations. And I don't need to get into whether they violated. Of course they violated the regulations. They have a lot more nuclear material afterwards. Israel showed Israel broke into their vaults and got their documentation showing they violated. But it goes back to the notion that Iran is not, it is not on the same par as a legitimate country from the West that has laws. And we start with the assumption that all countries are equal. Some are good and some are bad, but actually none of the good countries are good because they're not perfect. And we can find one or two things they screwed up on. So they're not good, and we should all apologize. And by the way, the only reason we are a little bit good is because we oppressed other people. This is the whole mantra that's going on, and it's part of the Obama doctrine of They have a perfect right to do anything they want within their philosophy because their philosophy and our philosophy are equal. And I think we all need, I don't think, we need to reject that or the West is done. And if we don't, we just like we needed to reject the notion that Nazi Germany was violating the Treaty of Versailles and it wasn't okay, even though it was a tough treaty and they shouldn't have been made to do all those terrible things after World War I. Of course they should. Because of World War I, more dead people than in the history of humankind. But here we are with the Obama doctrine of equivalence, which is Iran has just as much right to exist as United States and the UK. And once you start with that fallacious assumption, anything is possible. I don't think we should go down the path of does Iran have the right to defend itself, because I've always argued that states exist to defend the people. Iran doesn't defend its people, but it certainly defends its government. I mean, it only cares about its government, which is in itself a screw up and a backwards thing to think about. None of this surprises me. The problem is the West gets into the arguments at this level, at a high level, above the foundation, and they end up arguing kind of little things when you need to start at the beginning and say, wait a minute, Iran has contributed nothing to the world since the revolution. Can debate whether they did anything before it, but at least you could go to Iran before the revolution and live there. And there were actually Jews there who weren't constantly being murdered and such. It is not the same. And you have to have that kind of a view that there are good countries and evil countries. And Iran is a pure evil country. And all Iran has done with all of its money, most of which, by the way, is because Joe Biden let up the sanctions, all right, is to sponsor terrorism. They are the largest sponsor of terrorism in the world. And you hear people say that, and again, it's one of these flippant comments like, that means something, stop, full stop. That's what Iran does. Iran sponsors terrorism and it oppresses its people, especially its women. Never mind other religious minorities and people who have different sexual preferences. That's what Iran does. Why anybody would defend Iran and listen to people who defend Iran is beyond me. That's the fundamental problem here.
Marco?
Yeah, I mean, the Islamic Republic of Iran is just a bunch of people, clerics, who claim to be able to have a special relationship with a ghost. And with that, they enslave millions of people, negating the rights of millions of people who live in Iran. So to argue that Iran has got right to anything when they don't recognize rights in the first place is just laughable. And of course, it's this kind of stolen concept stuff going on, isn't it? This guy talks about the rights of something that doesn't recognize rights in the first place. So, I mean, he's used to live with contradiction in his head, and he's clearly spew stuff out like he's a bit like a parrot. He's triggered by certain words, and every time he hears something like Iran, he says, "Oh, I hate Israel, therefore I'll find a reason to justify my assertion." It's repellent. That's why it's repellent. It's trying to make up and push a make believe world lives in his head, and try to convince us to believe what he says. And of course, the people on his side cheer and say he's winning the argument, because they have enough to see somebody in their tribe to say anything, and they will cheer. They're sheep. They don't understand what they're saying. They don't criticize the essence of the argument. They just cheer for their colors.
Sorry, Richard, before I go to you, Michael has to leave in a bit, so I just want to ask Michael for any closing thoughts, and also where can people find you?
Yeah, I think after all this war, and it's beautiful to see Israel actually fighting back now in ways that might be described as disproportionate, which means to win. That's what it means to win a war, to be disproportionate response. Otherwise, you end up in a tie, which is what the world wants. Because a proportionate response means you do to them what they did to you, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, please think about liberty and what lies at the foundation of all of our Western culture. and I don't care if it's Western culture or not, but to me, liberty is the essence of human flourishing. Let people achieve whatever they can. Any philosophy that contradicts that or attempts to tell you that somebody else knows better what to do than you do needs to be shunned. Kaufman, 2Fs, LinkedIn, pleasure, and I'll see you guys again soon. Sorry, I have to run.
No worries.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So let me go to Richard, but quickly, I want to ask people in the chat, what color do you think Marco and Richard have when it comes to their t-shirts? Please let me know in the chat. I'll mention why later. But Richard, what do you think about the last clip we saw?
Well, I just wanted to refer to the fact that, of course, they go on to say this, or at least Alan Dershowitz goes on to make this point, that, of course, Mohammed Hijab knows this as well, in the same way that he knows that the rape story is complete BS. He knows that this wasn't a consulate building or an embassy building. This was an ancillary building in close to, but not in the consulate, and it was where terrorists were planning activity, and he knows why it was hit. And all that, and it's choosing, obviously deliberately to evade that and to avoid that from the argument. And it's a bit like this, in the same way that B'Tselem do it, as I mentioned earlier, by starting at a particular point. He's ignored what led up to this April strike, and he's ignored why it occurred. And therefore, he's trying to distort the picture. So it's all intentional techniques again to cheat and to lie. And it doesn't hold water, obviously.
Yeah, so we had a bit more clips, but I think I'm not gonna torture you guys more. As I've said, if you really want to see the rest of it, or basically the full one, because we skipped a lot of the just basically Mohammed Hijab just attacking Alan Dershowitz. But if you want to see it, it's in the description. We have a few more super chats. Thank you, Alex. She says, Islamic goons will support you if you smear poo on your face and dance Macarena. Psychophans don't translate to respect outside of the circle of goons. As much as I would like to say that, the sort of like the support for people like Mohammed Hijab just comes from like crazy people. The fact is that there are protests on the streets of London. There are protests across the US on university grounds, as well as rest of the Europe. And of course, also many governments actively supporting the Palestinian side. So while it's nice to think that this is just crazy people, the fact is that a lot of the world is basically standing against Israel, and against Israel, basically sort of being accepted that they can defend themselves. We also have a super chat from Dan. Thank you so much. He says, Mohammed Hijab is a jihadist. He would have met pager treatment if not for a British passport. Such a shame that such people have acquired Western passport. Is he actually Lebanese? Do you guys know?
I'm not sure, no.
I'll try to look it up. I mean, it would depend how he got if he was born in the UK, or if he had like UK parents, or if he moved for education. You can't base people on ideology, or you cannot deny sort of, especially, I mean, if he was like arguing for these things maybe before he was immigrating or asking for a British citizenship, maybe then. But if he did it before he went like this, people have to be allowed to move around. That's why the West is better, because we accept that people have different ideas, and people can move freely and should be allowed to move freely, and basically, as long as they don't violate rights, should be allowed to basically be left alone. Thank you also, Dan, for another super chat. He says 100% support to Israel from India. Israel fighting for humanity. We understand what you go through. Hopefully, Israel stop Iran from going nuclear. I'm wondering how, because I've seen a lot of support coming from India, people saying like, India supports Israel. I'm wondering if that's generally the sentiment or in India, and now here's the racist comment, if there's just so many of them that you would see more of them, since, you have more people, so you have more people on both sides.
I think because of the partition of the subcontinent after the the 50s, Pakistan has got the Muslim majority, and the Hindus are in what's India now. And let's put it away, Islam hasn't got a very good reputation in India as such, for obvious reasons sometimes. So yeah.
And those are all the super chats, so thank you. Let me quickly look up what people were saying about the colors. So let's see.
Correct answer begins with a B.
So salmon pink, fluorescent black, dark gray, green, greenish. Okay, I read all the ones that didn't say blue, so I have been proven right. I think it's half. Half people said blue, half people said a bit of a different color. Basically, on the production meeting, those guys said that we are all wearing blue, which I'm clearly wearing blue, but I'm not so sure about them.
Yeah. So school of logic of Mohammed Jihad.
Yes. Yeah. That's why these clips are dangerous. Pollute your mind.
You're radicalized.
Yes. Okay. Anything before we wrap up? And also, where can people find you?
I just my last comment just wanted to be about what people's stated motives are, because I think that comes out through this clip quite a lot, because people like Mohammed Hijab are always distrusting people's stated motives and assuming they're lying. So he's always assuming that that Piers Morgan or Dershowitz aren't telling the truth about their own arguments. And of course, he's always distrusting the stated motives of people like Hamas and their charter, because the stated motives of Hamas is clear enough as well. You don't need a secondary level. So giving some credence, at least initially, and examining the stated motive of people before you try and pretend they're saying something else is obviously a vital way of proceeding properly. But obviously, he's not going to listen to that. I recognize that. Do you want to do where we can find us?
Yeah, Brief Objective, short videos, sister channel to this one, link in the description below, and ARCUK Substack.
You can find me on my YouTube channel, then I'll try to finally post there something. Someone in the chat is asking, please do a program about Israeli group. He spells this Bet Salem, but I think he meant Bet Salem. So we already did one show. Try to look up. I'll put in how you actually, or maybe I can even. I'll try to look up the video and I'll put it here in the chat. So just wait a little bit after we wrap up, and I'll put it. We already covered it. It's basically an Israeli-based non-profit that I think has a very misaligned or very wrong motivation when it comes to what they report on. And with that, thank you everybody for joining us today.
I was wondering, is there something to do with the US Constitution later on today? Just wondering.
Yes. No, we actually have to cancel that. So thank you for calling me out. So I have to now openly state that we don't have it. So the Constitution course, which is for the ARCUK, Read the Metal members and Inner Circle members, we have to postpone today's session. I'll post we actually do have a topic, so I'll post the scheduled live stream for the Inner Circle members. It's going to be next week, and also we'll keep the last week's session for a week longer, basically.
This was the worst plug ever.
But it's a great course, and you really should check it out if you can.
So thank you everybody for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow with another episode of the Daily Objective and the reality show. Bye-bye.
Bye.